Crimson spread across Naomi Carter's sunflower dress as she crumpled outside Brookfield Public Library. Three officers stood frozen, their barrels still hot. Miles away, her father Daniel received the urgent alert. They had no clue who they'd just fired upon, or what relentless storm was about to descend. Before we unravel this shocking saga of injustice and a father's unbreakable mission for truth, drop a comment sharing where you're tuning in from. If this tale of racial bias and a father's war against corruption speaks to you, smash that like button and subscribe for more stories uncovering hidden truths. Now let's dive in to how a gifted deaf black teenager's future was shattered and how her father forced an entire police force to its knees. Naomi Carter wasn't an ordinary 15-year-old. Born profoundly deaf, she interpreted the world with uncanny sharpness, her presence often leaving grown-ups marveling at her brilliance. Her hands moved like lightning across American Sign Language, each gesture clean and graceful. Her keen eyes absorbed every detail, mastering lip reading with flawless precision. Wherever she went, her advanced voice tablet accompanied her, converting her typed words into articulate speech, ensuring her quick intelligence resonated far beyond her silent world. Her father, Daniel Carter, had provided every tool to guarantee her success in a society built without her in mind. At 44, Daniel carried himself like a man forged by discipline, standing tall, his years in national defense carved into muscle and authority. Silver threads streaked his hair, deepening his gravitas. After retiring from the intelligence sector 6 years earlier, Daniel became one of the Midwest's most sought after cybersecurity strategists. Clients rarely knew the full range of his talents. The skills that once safeguarded top secret interests now narrowed to a singular mission, shielding his daughter from a world eager to misunderstand her. Daniel had raised Naomi on his own after losing his wife, Claire, to pancreatic cancer half a decade earlier. The grief nearly destroyed him, yet Naomi became his anchor, tethering him to life. Together they built a private world of codes, traditions, and laughter, a fortress of love only they understood. Every Sunday morning became their pancake contest, outlandish shapes, outrageous flavors, endless laughter. Every success Naomi earned, big or small, ended with their signature handshake, fingers snapping, wink exchanged. Moving to Brookfield, Michigan was Daniel's careful decision. The prestigious Brookfield Academy boasted one of the nation's best deaf education programs within its rigorous academics. Yet Daniel hadn't foreseen how their presence would rattle the polished white suburb. Brookfield's surface level liberalism masked something uglier. The Carters bought a tidy colonial on Cedar Lane, paying in cash from Daniel's savings. Within 24 hours, their neighbor Margaret Holloway had called police, claiming suspicious strangers were moving boxes inside. Officers arrived, shocked when Daniel coolly presented his federal credentials. Only then did they retreat. Incidents like this became routine. Naomi found herself quietly excluded at school, study groups without her, parties she wasn't invited to. Parents hesitated to drop their children at her house. Discomfort lingered behind Brookfield's polite smiles. Daniel himself endured constant traffic stops on familiar streets, interrogated about his destination inside his own neighborhood. He documented each encounter meticulously, his training turning prejudice into organized records. What encouraged him, though, was Naomi's resilience. Rather than crumbling under racism and ableism, she redirected her anger into advocacy and innovation. For months, Naomi had been developing a groundbreaking app to help deaf individuals safely interact with police during emergencies or traffic stops. The app displayed clear instructions and automated key communication to reduce deadly misunderstandings. Other deaf people's tragedies fueled her determination to make sure others never shared their fate. The morning it all happened began unremarkably. Naomi danced down the stairs, her curls tied with a bright sunflower scrunchie matching her favorite yellow dress. She signed excitedly about her meeting with her coding mentor, Miss Liu, at the library. They would finalize the interface for her life-changing creation. Daniel's heart swelled with pride. watching her pack her tablet and notebooks with care. He offered to drive her, but Naomi, at 15, treasured her independence. The library was only a few blocks away. Daniel double-checked the weather, her smartwatch, her alert app. Then he hugged her goodbye, sunlight catching her dress. He didn't know it would be the last time he saw her whole and unbroken. He couldn't imagine that Brookfield's poison stretched far deeper than individual prejudice, that its very police force embodied it. The tools once used to protect his country would soon be weaponized for a battle far more personal. Daniel Carter had faced hostile regimes across continents, but nothing prepared him for the war awaiting once Naomi left that sunny Tuesday morning in June. The town's pristine exterior would soon crumble, exposing its rotting core. Naomi, humming softly to feel vibration, walked confidently toward Brookfield's red brick library. Just a block away, she spotted Mrs. Donnelly, an elderly neighbor, struggling with groceries after her bags tore apart. Without hesitation, Naomi dropped to her knees, gathering runaway apples and cans. She offered to carry them to the woman's porch. Mrs. Donnelly squeezed her hand with gratitude, unaware of eyes watching. Officer Darren Keller sat in his patrol car at the corner, his gaze narrowing. A 6-year veteran with a thick file of complaints, Keller radioed in, "Dispatch, I've got a suspicious black female teen, possibly harassing an elderly white woman." Potential theft dispatch asked about weapons. Keller, "Negative," reaching into bags. 90 seconds later, backup arrived. Officer Craig Donovan, a bulky ex-military cop with a history of force complaints buried by bureaucracy, joined. Alongside him was Officer Ethan Price, 3 years on the job, his idealism fading under Keller and Donovan's influence. Together they moved in, triangulating with rehearsed precision. By then, Naomi had already delivered the groceries and continued walking toward the library. Her mind was fixed on her app and her mentor. The building's glass doors reflected morning sun. Miss Lou was inside, stacking books, unaware of the storm brewing outside. Keller's voice boomed, "Police! Stop right there!" But Naomi, sealed off from sound, kept walking. Keller advanced, hand on holster. Donovan and Price fanned out, executing formation. Miss Lou's eyes widened, spotting Naomi through the library's windows. She rushed toward the entrance, fear curling in her stomach. She knew too well what was about to happen. Outside, Naomi reached into her tote for her tablet, eager to show her progress. Donovan barked, "She's reaching!" No weapon appeared, yet all 3 officers pulled their guns. They shouted commands Naomi could never hear. She turned slightly, tablet halfway drawn. Seconds stretched into eternity, horror hanging in the air. The first bullet came from Keller, striking Naomi's left shoulder, spinning her around. Donovan's shots followed, one grazing her ribs, another tearing her thigh. After a painful pause, Price fired too, hitting her lower back. Naomi's sunflower dress exploded crimson as she fell, her tablet glowing beside her, on the steps. Miss Lou burst out the library doors, screaming, "She's deaf!" "She couldn't hear you." She fell beside Naomi, pressing her cardigan to the wounds. "She's 15! What have you done?" Patrons pressed against the glass, horrified. Others recorded on their phones, capturing the chaos, documenting a crime unfolding in daylight. Graduate student Eric Summers, seated near the entrance, filmed everything, hands trembling, phone raised. He captured Keller, barking orders, trying to seize control. "Secure the scene! Confiscate those phones!" Keller shouted. Donovan radioed in, crafting careful words. "Shots fired at Brookfield Library. Suspect down. Requesting medical." The truth already twisting. Eric streamed his video to cloud storage before anyone could confiscate his device. His choice would become critical. Officers began pressing bystanders to surrender their footage, desperation leaking from their voices. Sirens wailed in the distance. Miss Liu refused to move, glaring up at the men who had shattered Naomi's future. Around them, fear turned to fury. Whispers rippled, "She's deaf. She's just a kid." The officer's facade of authority weakened under growing scrutiny. Yet Keller persisted, demanding compliance. Donovan loomed, hand twitching near his weapon. Price hesitated, guilt flickering in his eyes. The town's ugly truth had finally surfaced. Naomi's blood pooled, her tablet screen frozen on her app's design. A project born to protect people like her from tragedies exactly like this. The irony cut through Miss Lou's heart like glass. Around them, Brookfield's polished image fractured. The fight Daniel Carter never expected had just begun. Emergency responders closed in, sirens screaming. Miss Lou's voice cracked as she cried, "She's deaf!" She never heard them. Witnesses refused to lower their cameras. The evidence was multiplying faster than Keller could contain. The truth, raw and undeniable, had already escaped beyond their reach. Still, Keller barked orders, his words dripping with authority. "Control the perimeter. Get those devices." Donovan nodded sharply, moving to intimidate civilians. Price faltered, the weight of conscience evident. Meanwhile, Eric Summers, pale and trembling, kept recording from a distance. The evidence would survive, preserved in his cloud. Ambulance lights flooded the street as paramedics sprinted up the steps. Donovan's voice crackled through his radio. "Suspect down, medical requested." But no one could erase what had happened. Naomi Carter, brilliant 15, deaf, gunned down in daylight. The town of Brookfield would never again hide behind its gleaming facade. Claire knelt beside Naomi, murmuring words of comfort, though she knew the girl could not hear. Her hands pressed firmly against the wounds, while her eyes blazed at the officers fidgeting nearby, already adjusting their accounts. 3 miles away, Daniel Carter studied a client's system logs when his phone vibrated. His custom-coded app linked to Naomi's smartwatch triggered the alert. Heart rate spikes, followed by a sharp collapse in vitals, GPS coordinates, Brookfield Library. Daniel didn't think. He moved. Snatching keys and phone, his mind already raced through scenarios and contingencies, every reflex honed by years of intelligence work. A 7-minute drive compressed into under 4 as Daniel maneuvered Brookfield streets with surgical precision. Arriving, he found flashing lights, an ambulance, 4 squad cars, yellow tape sealing off the library's steps. The once quiet entrance now resembled a crime scene. The hum of chaos beat against his carefully controlled calm. Shoving through the crowd, Daniel identified himself to a young officer at the perimeter. The cop hesitated until Daniel displayed credentials that still commanded authority. Barriers fell away. What Daniel saw next would never leave him. His daughter lifted onto a stretcher, sunflower dress-soaked scarlet, face ghostly beneath the oxygen mask. Claire stood nearby, her clothes drenched in Naomi's blood, locked in heated argument with another officer demanding her statement. Daniel advanced with deadly calm, introducing himself to paramedics. "I'm riding with her," he said, not as a request, but an order. His eyes briefly met Keller's. The officer looked away first. Keller knew instinctively that routine cover-ups would not suffice against this father. The ambulance doors slammed shut. Inside, Daniel clasped a Naomi's limp hand, silently vowing justice. Whatever walls had protected these men would crumble. Brookfield itself would change forever. Sirens screamed as the ambulance tore toward Brookfield Memorial's emergency entrance. Paramedics rattled off vitals. 15-year-old female, multiple gunshot wounds, shoulder, thigh, lower back, BP 70/40, dropping fast. The trauma bay erupted into motion. Dr. Caroline Foster, lead surgeon, barked commands with the precision of a general. "Type in cross 4 units. Trauma series now. Prep operating room 2. Daniel tried to follow, but 2 officers intercepted him, hands resting near holsters. "Sir, you need to wait here." His voice cut like glass. "That's my 15-year-old daughter. She is deaf. Your colleagues shot her." He slowly displayed his federal consultant ID. "Radio Chief Blackwell. Tell him Daniel Carter is here." Recognition flickered across the officer's face. He stepped aside, already lifting his radio. Daniel caught the elevator doors just before they closed, positioning himself at Naomi's head, careful not to hinder the medical team. Her eyelids fluttered weakly. Daniel signed, "I love you." Her fingers twitched faintly before darkness reclaimed her. Within half an hour, the hospital transformed. Uniformed officers crowded the waiting area, claiming to secure the scene but clearly staging intimidation. Word spread quickly. Brookfield's black residents began arriving in numbers, their silent presence thickening the sterile air with tension. Power shifted in the space between uniforms and community. Police Chief Warren Blackwell arrived, tall, broad-shouldered, silver hair gleaming under fluorescent lights. 15 years at the helm had molded the department in his own ruthless image. He swept into a private room with Keller and Donovan and Price, shutting the door, leaving civilians outside guessing at their whispered strategies. In the operating room, Doctor. Foster fought to repair the devastation. The shoulder shot fractured Naomi's collarbone but spared arteries. The thigh wound missed the femoral by a hair. The bullet in her lower back was most dire, lodged dangerously close to her spine, threatening permanent paralysis. Every second mattered. Outside, Daniel sat rigid, mind whirring behind a mask of composure. Training dictated, crises required planning, not panic. He mapped allies, tracked threats, calculated strategies. His silent vigil broke when a tall, sharply dressed black man in his 50s approached. Mr. Carter, I'm Anthony Brooks, civil rights attorney. I came immediately. Daniel studied him with measured caution. How do you know where to find me? Brooks' voice lowered. I've tracked Brookfield PD for 2 years. What happened tonight matches their pattern. The gathering crowd isn't random. Your community knows the truth. Your daughter's case might finally bring this system crashing down. Daniel's response was quiet steel. I don't need a case, Mr. Brooks. I need accountability. With or without the courts, their exchange cut short as doctor. Foster emerged in scrubs, cap askew, face taut with fatigue, yet resolute. Daniel braced instinctively, reading her guarded but not hopeless expression. Mr. Carter, Naomi is stable, Doctor, Foster said firmly. We removed 2 bullets and repaired her shoulder and thigh. The third remains near her L3 vertebrae. Extraction risks outweigh benefit for now. She's headed to ICU. There may be nerve damage in her left leg. We'll know more in 24 hours. Daniel's nod was slight but loaded with focus. When can I see her? In recovery within an hour, Doctor, Foster promised. Her voice softened. I should tell you, police requested an officer posted in her room and immediate questioning once she wakes. Daniel's expression hardened into something cold and immovable. My daughter is a minor. She is deaf. She will not be interrogated without me present. And with an interpreter of my choosing, Dr. Foster nodded. I can restrict access for medical reasons, at least 12 hours. For the first time, Daniel's lips twitched with the faintest ghost of a smile. When she left, Brooks leaned closer. Blackwell is already shaping his story. Those officers will have aligned their accounts before giving statements. Daniel's reply was low, deliberate. Fabricated stories fracture under pressure. Inconsistencies are leverage. His eyes gleamed with a strategist's certainty. He was already preparing his counteroffensive. Hours later, Daniel sat beside Naomi's ICU bed, her small frame dwarfed by machines. He made sure he'd be the first face she saw upon waking. Outside, tensions surged. Officers demanded access. Hospital security resisted. Community members gathered vigil-like in the hall, refusing to leave. A standoff was brewing. Chief Blackwell finally appeared, demanding an audience. He loomed, voice authoritative. Mr. Carter, we must investigate. One of my officers will need your daughter's statement as soon as possible. Daniel rose to meet him eye to eye. Warren James Blackwell, 15 years chief, 2 buried force complaints. Donor ties documented. Blackwell's jaw flexed, though his mask held. If you think intimidation will work, you're mistaken. This was an unfortunate incident caused by your daughter's refusal to comply. Daniel's voice dropped, vibrating with lethal promise. My daughter is deaf. She reached for her device. This is your department's pattern, and I will expose it. Blackwell stiffened. Threats against an officer carry weight in my jurisdiction. Daniel's eyes bored into his. Not a threat, a promise. And your jurisdiction's about to change. As if summoned, Brooks entered with other attorneys and community leaders. Chief Blackwell, I've filed for an injunction preventing contact with the victim. Brooks continued, I've also demanded preservation of all body cam footage, dispatch logs, and witness statements. Blackwell retreated, though his eyes flashed a warning at Daniel. Later that evening, reviewing hospital security feeds with codes he'd quietly accessed, Daniel spotted a deliberate 15-minute gap outside Naomi's room. His instincts sharpened instantly. Years of counterintelligence whispered the truth. Tampering. Brookfield's police were already covering tracks. But Daniel Carter was no ordinary father. This was his battlefield now, and every broken thread, every falsified second of footage, would become evidence in the war he was preparing to unleash on them all. Downstairs, the waiting room pulsed with tension, police uniforms on one side, the community on the other. Conversation simmered, every whisper feeding the storm. Upstairs, Daniel sat unmoving, a sentinel at his daughter's side. Naomi slept under heavy sedation, her heartbeat slow but steady. The battle outside mirrored the battle within. When Blackwell returned, his voice was sharper. Carter, your grief is clouding reason. Cooperation will help your daughter Daniel's calm stare slice through him. Reason? My daughter was shot because she exists. I spent 2 decades dismantling hostile regimes. You've no idea what you've ignited. Witnesses shivered at his chilling tone. Blackwell straightened, bluffing authority. Brookfield protects its own. You'll find the system difficult to fight. Daniel leaned closer, voice just above a whisper. I dismantled entire systems before you built yours, and I will dismantle this one. Silence crackled between them, heavy with the gravity of a war declared. The chief faltered briefly before regaining composure. Take care, mister. Carter lines you're crossing don't erase easily. Brooks stepped forward, his attorneys flanking him. Chief, legal lines have already been drawn. You're on notice. For the first time, Blackwell's eyes flickered with doubt. The shield of invincibility was beginning to crack. Tension thickened in the corridor. Community leaders arrived with documentation. Officers whispered uneasily. Daniel remained still, his gaze never leaving Blackwell. This isn't over, the chief growled. Daniel replied evenly, You're right. It's just beginning. His words carried not anger, but inevitability, the tone of a man who never lost wars. Brooks announced loudly, We've filed injunctions. Evidence is secured. Your officers will not touch this victim again. The statement echoed like a gavel strike. Blackwell's retreat was deliberate, but his warning glare lingered on Daniel. The balance of power in Brookfield had shifted forever. Later, Daniel reviewed the tampered footage again, memorizing every detail of the missing minutes. This wasn't random incompetence, it was calculated. His training screamed the truth. Brookfield PD had already begun erasing evidence, but they underestimated the wrong man. Daniel Carter would expose every lie. The reckoning had begun. He began cataloging everything with surgical discipline, spinning encrypted backups that synced to locked servers only he could access. By sunrise, local outlets latched onto the story, police fingerprints all over the spin. Teen injured in police miscommunication, one headline claimed. Another framed it as an unfortunate incident during a routine stop. Daniel watched the coverage with the patience of a strategist, arranging pieces for a crushing middle game. Have you ever asked how far you'd go to protect your child from a machine built to break them? Comment 1 if Daniel should use every skill. 2 if the system deserves trust. Our story turns the screws tighter as Daniel starts assembling evidence that will rattle Brookfield's foundations. What would you do if the guardians of your neighborhood were the hunters? Like this, if you want corruption exposed, subscribe to follow Daniel's fight. What he uncovers next will stun you and enrage the right people. But how deep does Brookfield's rot run? With Naomi stabilized and watched over by trusted community members, rotating shifts outside her ICU room, Daniel activated the precise, relentless part of himself that once served national security. He moved with cold purpose, the protective father and the seasoned operator fused into one. He returned home briefly, retrieving specialized gear hidden in compartments even meticulous searches would miss. Within an hour, he established a secure command post in the basement of Reverend Leonard Hayes's church, historic First Baptist, an anchor of Brookfield's black community for over 80 years. Faith upstairs, hard drives, and plans below. They won't expect you to work from here, Reverend Hayes said, helping position monitors and hardened comms. Police only visit to harass. Daniel nodded, already focused on priority one, recovering Eric Summers' video, which vanished from platforms hours after posting. Someone had reach. He had deeper reach. It wouldn't stay buried. Using recovery suites and quiet backdoor paths into cloud infrastructure, a ghost of his agency days, Daniel bypassed defenses and found the deleted file in Eric's backups. The raw clip matched witness accounts. Naomi, unaware of police behind her reaching for her tablet, then shots. Multiple, without legitimate provocation, commands she could never have heard. More damning was the aftermath. Officers pivoting from shock to narrative control. Keller's voice snapped. Get those phones. No recordings. Daniel encrypted the file, mirrored it across hardened nodes, then pinged Eric through secure channels. They came to my place, Eric typed. Donovan and another, no warrant, pressured me to delete everything. You did the right thing, Daniel assured him. Your safety first. I've recovered the footage with the video secured. He pivoted to the officers. Through public records, pulls via Anthony Brooks's legal team, and less conventional access, he began compiling profiles. Patterns emerged quickly when you knew where to pry and how hard. Officer Darren Keller had 8 civilian complaints in 6 years, all Black or Latino victims, each dismissed without serious review. His social accounts, locked to the public but not to Daniel's tools, showed ties to white nationalist adjacent groups and ugly commentary about Brookfield's changing demographics. The mask slipped easily once privacy walls came down. Officer Craig Donovan's record was uglier. He'd transferred from southern Michigan after 2 justified shootings mired in conflicting witness statements. Chief Blackwell personally recruited him. His military police file contained a reprimand for unnecessary roughness with Iraqi civilians, buried deep, not beyond Daniel's reach. Systems hid secrets. He specialized in unstitching systems. Officer Ethan Price looked different. A newer hire with no formal complaints. Training marks emphasized de-escalation and community policing. His posts suggested a man who entered the job with genuine idealism, now fraying under department culture. Daniel flagged Price as a potential pressure point, someone who might crack or cooperate when truth pressed hard. The library proved a gold mine. Claire had witnessed the shooting and kept meticulous logs of police harassment there over 2 years. They target Black and brown teens who use our computers, she told Daniel at a quiet coffee shop 3 towns over. I've filed complaints. Board shrugs. Nothing changes. Claire's notes were precise. Dates, times, officers, outcomes. A board member confided that Blackwell threatened to reduce patrols if they challenged his community policing techniques. Claire documented ID checks aimed exclusively at non-white patrons and random backpack searches that somehow always landed on the same kids. Patterns don't lie. People do. The breakthrough turned damaging evidence into a sledgehammer. Months earlier, after his third baseless traffic stop, Daniel had slipped a discreet digital backdoor into Brookfield PD servers as a personal safety hedge. Now it became a weapon. He opened the vault, and the department's private language spilled onto his screens. Internal threads mapped a coordinated campaign confirming his worst suspicions. In one email, Blackwell labeled Focus Enforcement Zones, all overlapping Black neighborhoods or gathering spaces. Another directed enhanced scrutiny of non-resident elements, coded speak for targeting people of color. After Naomi's shooting, an order went out, aligned narratives, emphasized noncompliance, threatening movement. The digital trail showed prior excessive force cases strategically buried, witnesses intimidated, evidence altered. An unofficial quota system prioritized ticketing and arrests of black residents for minor infractions, performance reviews tied to those numbers. The spreadsheets were indifferent, the pattern was not. Metrics in the wrong hands become machinery for harm. A financial vein pulsed beneath it all, payments between the department and Clearview Corrections, a private prison contractor paying administrative fees to the city tied to arrest volume. As Daniel organized proofs, protests surged outside the station and City Hall. Police escalated their presence, riot gear, batons, tactical calm masking panic. Blackwell's pressers painted demonstrators as outside agitators, defending officers' actions as textbook procedure against potential threats. Daniel shook surveillance tails assigned to watch him, using counter-surveillance routes and decoys to lose an unmarked pair following from the hospital. Chasing him was like chasing smoke. By the time they blinked, he was gone. One discovery chilled even him: illegal facial recognition software calibrated to flag black residents with any prior police contact, however minor. The system funneled names for enhanced patrol awareness. Purchases flowed through a shell company funded by donors Daniel already linked to extremist circles, sidestepping council oversight with surgical corruption. In First Baptist's basement, he sorted evidence into clean stacks: civil rights violations, procedural misconduct, financial impropriety, direct racial targeting. Subcategories cross-referenced: emails to patrol maps, body cam gaps to dispatch logs, budget lines to donor networks. The case became multi-pronged, redundant, resilient, and lethal to any single point failure. The most explosive thread centered on Donovan. 7 incidents in the last year featured identical language: perceived threatening movement, possible weapon. Body cams were lost due to technical issues, but Daniel's backdoor retrieved shadow copies, each contradicting Donovan's reports. No threats, no weapons, just ordinary black residents, escalated into suspects. During a quiet visit, Naomi had awakened briefly, still sedated. Daniel signed slowly. "I will make this right." She formed a faint reply. "Be careful. Love you." That exchange hardened his resolve. It wasn't only justice, it was survivability, building a world where her deafness and blackness weren't treated as provocation. Exiting via a service corridor to avoid tails, Daniel received an encrypted ping from Brooks. "Dia Grant calling presser tomorrow. Sources say justified narrative." Daniel's reply was minimal. Expected. Proceeding to phase 2. He felt the old mission rhythm returning, the calm before striking a target already mapped from every angle. That night, Reverend Hayes set a coffee on the table of humming equipment. "Are you ready for the blowback? These people hold power like inheritance." Daniel glanced up, expression unblinking. "Every fortress has failure points. Brookfields are exposed. Now it's leverage, timing, pressure systems bend first. Later, they break." By dawn, a comprehensive dossier stood complete: corruption around Naomi's shooting, and an architecture of racial targeting woven through Brookfield's institutions. As Daniel allowed himself a controlled, fleeting rest, the promise he'd signed to Naomi echoed: "I will make this right." It was no longer assurance. It was operational doctrine. The municipal press room buzzed as cameras jockeyed for position. District Attorney Melissa Grant 50 stepped to the podium. Polished bun, sharper reputation, 11 years in office, sterling conviction stats, whispers of higher ambitions. "Good morning," she began, voice tuned to credibility. "I'm addressing the officer-involved shooting at Brookfield Public Library. First, our thoughts are with Naomi Carter and her family as she recovers." Grant's tone was practiced empathy layered over institutional caution. She promised a thorough, impartial review, then previewed a familiar storyline: rapidly evolving circumstances, perceived threat, split-second decisions, language built to soothe donors and dull the public's sense of outrage. Daniel watched from First Baptist, jaw set, feeds open. Police emails, dispatch audio, scrubbed body cam indexes, the recovered bystander video queued on multiple servers. If the DA sold a justification narrative, His counterstrike would detonate across platforms and inboxes before the microphones cooled. Truth, prepared properly, arrives like a breach charge. Grant continued. Our preliminary assessment recognizes the complexity officers face. She cited compliance concerns, motion toward a device, and an immediate safety response. Daniel highlighted phrases on screen: noncompliance, device, threat, each tied to Blackwell's emails instructing aligned narratives. He didn't need to guess their story, they'd already written it for him. At 48 hours, we're committed to transparency, Grant concluded, flanked by flags and careful smiles. We'll share findings as appropriate. Daniel noted the hedges, the exits. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted. The room buzzed with professional distance. He closed one window and opened another. The upload queue. Phase 2 was live. She paused, letting the room hold its breath. The Brookfield District Attorney's Office treats every use of force event with absolute seriousness. I am personally overseeing a thorough, impartial inquiry off camera. Daniel had already pulled Melissa Grant's internal emails instructing staff to find mitigating context and examine the victim's background for anything problematic. One message to Chief Blackwell was unmistakable: contain this fast. It's an election year. I don't need headaches. Daniel watched from Reverend Hayes's office, expression unreadable, while Grant continued. While the investigation proceeds, I urge calm. Don't leap to conclusions from partial facts or inflammatory posts. The performance played smoothly, on cue. Our officers deserve due process, like any citizen, she added. What Grant didn't mention, the meeting she'd held the previous evening with Mayor Stephen Caldwell and Blackwell, strategizing how to blunt legal and political fallout. Daniel possessed the recording, captured by a discreet device seated inside the mayor's paneled conference room. That audio stripped the mask. The question isn't if we charge, Grant said coolly, but what minimal charges pacify the public without estranging the department. Caldwell, silver-haired and calculating, answered with arithmetic. Union support evaporates. I lose mid-year money. 6 figures gone. Fix this before fundraising. The tactic was containment, not truth. City machinery, spun up on command. Detective Elena Morales, Internal Affairs, 20-year veteran, one of few Latina officers, opened the file and felt pressure immediately. Preliminary by Friday, her supervisor insisted, though such probes usually spanned weeks. Chief wants this clean and quick. The edict clashed with her reputation for painstaking thoroughness and integrity. At Brookfield Memorial, Naomi stabilized enough to move from ICU to a private room, the road ahead still steep. Doctors confirmed nerve damage affecting her left leg. Full mobility remained uncertain. Therapy posed extra hurdles. Treating trauma in a deaf patient recovering from gunshot wounds demands careful, specialized communication that few possess. During a rare break, when Daniel showered and changed, 2 officers tried entering Naomi's room for routine questioning. Injunctions be damned. Dr. Caroline Foster physically blocked the doorway, citing medical necessity. When Daniel returned and learned of it, he layered defenses, credentialed private security. The hospital could not reasonably refuse at the threshold. Meanwhile, local media bent with the official wind. The Brookfield Chronicle, neutral at first, ran a front-page piece on the challenge of split-second decisions with disabled individuals, subtly implying Naomi's inability to hear commands made her appear threatening. A sidebar asked why she wasn't wearing visible deaf identifiers, blame reframed onto the victim. Television followed suit. UAL KF led with a former police trainer describing knife-edge decisions under threat. Not a syllable about inactive body cams or attempts to seize bystander recordings. More insidious segments hinted at Daniel's past government work, unnamed sources, dark insinuations, while smearing Naomi's app as a tool to undermine police authority. The coordination wasn't accidental. Daniel's surveillance showed Blackwell meeting station heads, handshakes for friends, veiled threats for skeptics. Access dangled like currency. The crescendo arrived when Brendan O'Rourke, regional police union boss with 25 years and a brawler's cadence, faced cameras on the department steps, a wall of uniforms aligned behind him. What happened at Brookfield Library is tragic, not criminal, O'Rourke proclaimed. Officers Keller, Donovan, and Price followed training when confronted with a perceived threat. His voice swelled. Rushing to vilify them endangers public safety. Today, every officer wonders whether doing their job will cost a career because of politics and media. Then he attacked Daniel directly. Serious questions surround Mr. Carter's background and motives. His government ties and current activity look aligned with groups that undermine law enforcement. Is he exploiting a tragedy to push a radical agenda? The message was unmistakable. Circle the wagons, scorch the critic, freeze the narrative. Returning home for additional equipment, Daniel found the front door splintered, rooms ransacked under a warrant citing potential evidence. Drives and towers were gone, expected. Critical data lived elsewhere. More telling were fresh surveillance bugs sprinkled through the house. He left them, feeding staged calls with misdirection, turning their ears into decoys. Community pushback met calibrated obstruction. Reverend Hayes's permit for a prayer vigil and support rally was delayed over sudden technicalities. Black-owned shops displaying solidarity messages were hit with surprise inspections. Minor citations that had slept for years. Parents of black students who spoke at the board meeting saw kids scrutinized for tardies and hemlines. Daniel read the pattern without emotion. Predictable moves from a fortified system. When attorney Anthony Brooks vented about fresh legal hurdles, Daniel kept steady. They're running a playbook they've perfected for decades, but it's a blueprint I've studied. Every maneuver exposes tells and leverage points I can exploit when timing aligns. Through secure channels resurrected from agency days, he pulled backups from clouds beyond local reach, reestablished hardened comms for witnesses, and seeded end-to-end encryption that would test even federal labs. Surveillance flagged Blackwell's target selection matrix, assigning officers to neighborhoods for their appetite for aggressive enforcement, particularly against minority residents. Documents showed black-owned businesses nudged toward more appropriate districts via regulatory attrition. Memos traced a years-long plan to preserve Brookfield's racial makeup through selective enforcement and intimidation. This wasn't a string of accidents, it was architecture. Naomi's shooting wasn't an anomaly, it was a predictable output of a designed machine. 7 days after the shooting, as Naomi attempted her first physical therapy steps, a secure ping from Brooks flashed urgency. Warrant issued. Your arrest. Allegations, evidence tampering, obstruction, unlawful surveillance. Move tonight Daniel had gamed that branch. Within 30 minutes, he vacated visible sites for a fallback location prepared with an old colleague, Malcolm Tate, former signals specialist, now keeping to a fortified small farm 20 miles out, opened his reinforced basement. Like old times, he said, wiring uplinks and failovers. Daniel allowed a rare edge of humor. Were we ever not the good guys? Malcolm's face cooled. They'll throw everyone at you now. State police may be federal if Blackwell can cash favors. Daniel powered a grid of monitors, feeds blossoming from key intersections and buildings. I'm counting on it. The harder they come, the sloppier they get. I only need one clean fracture outside. Patrols rolled. Inside, logs ticked and buffers quietly filled. That night, tactical teams hit 3 decoy locations Daniel had salted with faint digital heat. He watched calmly as doors burst, documenting each overreach, each flimsy affidavit, each witness muscled into silence. Evidence multiplied against officers, supervisors, and the culture that trained them. The case wasn't linear, it was encirclement. In the department's server stack, an unseen countdown advanced, scripts Daniel had staged to snapshot archives and dispatch mirrored packets beyond municipal reach. When the clock struck, containment would fail. The war had left its opening gambits. The middle game, the brutal one, was underway, and he was 6 moves ahead. Fluorescents carved hard lines across Naomi's room as Daniel slipped in through service corridors, bypassing cameras and predictable posts. He signed the day's developments, allies assembled, protections layered, pressure points mapped. Healing crawled forward, shoulder and thigh improving, back wound uncertain. Naomi's eyes tracked his hands, absorbing strategy like oxygen. Miss, Lou from the library is helping, he signed, watching understanding spark. She's kept detailed records of harassment. Naomi's fingers answered slowly, medicine still fogging speed, strength returning in stubborn increments. She always defended black kids when police showed. Is she safe? Daniel nodded. Protected. Dr. Foster, too. And Eric, the videographer. He didn't spell out the rest. The careful lattice of motives, ethics, and risk tolerances he'd charted for each ally, the secure dead drops and redundant channels, the escape hatches if pressure rose. Building coalitions wasn't kindness, it was calculus, trust multiplied by contingency, then hardened with verifiable proof. Down in First Baptist's basement, the board of evidence grew heavier. Internal emails, donor routes, patrol heat maps, quota spreadsheets, scrubbed body cam indices, illegal facial recognition logs, and the recovered video mirrored across fail safes. Daniel's hands moved relentlessly, naming files, cross referencing threads, turning chaos into a machine aimed back at its makers. Meanwhile, Brookfield responded with its old reflexes, rumor and intimidation. News teasers promised exclusive angles. Anonymous quotes framed Naomi's app as anti police tech. City spokespeople floated outside agitators, driving protests. To Daniel, each tactic was a breadcrumb, pointing to architects and gatekeepers who believed they were invisible. Night deepened. In safe house light, alerts pulsed as teams cracked doors on the decoys. Daniel recorded timestamps, badge numbers, warrant defects. Procedure is a weapon, he'd once taught. When they violate it, the wound is self inflicted. He archived everything, then checked Naomi's live feed. Steady breathing, quiet monitors, a fortress of care. He returned to the hospital before dawn, slipping past sleepy checkpoints, taking the chair beside her bed. He signed news of the day, measured, never panicked. Naomi watched, jaw set with a resilience that looked startlingly like his. Her hand found his wrist, squeezing once, an anchor, a demand, a vow. Claire's safe, he signed, and so is Eric. Reverend Hayes has our back. Attorney Brooks filed injunctions and preservation orders. The DA's spinning, but we have their words, not just their press lines. Naomi blinked away moisture. He added softly, your work, the app, still matters. Maybe now more than ever, she signed back, slower but clearer. Make sure she's protected, the librarian. Then, be careful. Daniel nodded. I will. He didn't explain the matrix of guards, proxies, and layered redundancies already in motion. Some truths waited for healthier days. For now, the mission was simple: defend, document, and do not break. Claire had provided not only her meticulous logs of library harassment, but introductions to other residents who'd faced similar targeting. Her librarian's precision produced a damning timeline of escalating police behavior, especially toward black teens using computers for homework and college applications. The spreadsheet of names, dates, and tactics read like choreography. After 7 tense days, Dr. Caroline Foster had kept a clinician's distance until officers tried to intimidate hospital staff and slip into Naomi's room despite injunctions. Her medical ethics snapped into action. With admin access, she pulled security footage showing officers discussing cleanup in a corridor they assumed wasn't being recorded. Eric Summers, the grad student whose video proved pivotal, overcame fear after initial intimidation and stepped forward publicly. His academic network mobilized a small army of civil rights scholars and clinic lawyers. He learned to document obsessively, back up everything twice, and speak with deliberate calm. Courage, he discovered, strengthens with repetition. Attorney Anthony Brooks assembled a pro bono strike force coordinating filings while navigating a judicial maze that kept sprouting new obstacles. The surprise potential ally arrived through secure intermediaries, Detective Elena Morales from Internal Affairs. She requested a discreet meeting beyond Brookfield's reach, asking Daniel to come armed with patience and proof. At a midnight truck stop 30 miles out, Morales spoke plainly. 2 decades in the department had taught her the smell of rot. This case reeked. She slid over internal files showing systematic burial of force complaints for officers favored by Blackwell. They want a whitewashed report, she said. I won't sign it. She added, Officer Ethan Price is wavering. He's asking questions no one wants. The note aligned with Daniel's profile, the youngest of the three, flashes of conscience visible in posture and eyes. A different kind of pressure point, less brittle, more human, capable of becoming witness or warning depending on approach. Surveillance corroborated it. Price's body language diverged from Keller and Donovan, their folded arms, squared jaws, practiced indignation. Price looked stricken, hands restless, gaze sliding toward exits. Daniel arranged a coincidental run-in at a convenience store off route. In 2 minutes, he confirmed what he'd already inferred. Doubt was winning. I joined to help people, Price murmured, scanning for eyes. This isn't what I signed up for. Daniel offered neither absolution nor threat, only a path, truth, documented and preserved. Price didn't say yes, but he didn't say no. With decent men, you leave space for conscience to step forward. Following the money, Daniel traced links between Brookfield PD and Clearview Corrections, a private prison outfit generously underwriting Blackwell's foundation and Mayor Caldwell's reelection. Clearview ran a medium security site 30 miles away, staffing regional contracts with inmate labor. Arrest spikes in black neighborhoods matched lucrative production schedules almost to the week. As Daniel built coalitions and evidence, the town fractured. Many rallied for Naomi, pressing for accountability despite bureaucratic tripwires. Others, largely from wealthier white enclaves, defended police, branding protesters as agitators, risking property values. Neighborhood associations posted statements about stability, language polished to sound calm while carrying a familiar chill. Churches split too. First Baptist under Reverend Hayes became an organizing hub, meals, legal workshops, childcare for court days. Larger, mostly white congregations urged patience with process, sermons on order outweighing justice. 9 days after the shooting, Daniel's operational security faced its sharpest test, a coordinated hospital sweep timed to his visit. Morales' warning pinged minutes before officers converged on Naomi's floor. Daniel vanished through maintenance tunnels, re-emerging blocks away. The near snag confirmed a leak near his circle. He rekeyed channels, narrowed distribution lists, rotated devices, and salted false trails. When systems hunt, you feed them ghosts until they starve. Physical therapy brought flickers of hope. Naomi gritted through pain, recalibrating balance and strength. During one session, she signed something she hadn't clearly communicated before. I recognized one of them, the big one, shaved head. Her movements sharpened with anger. He stopped me 2 months ago, made me empty my backpack. She signed that she'd shown her deaf ID. He'd laughed. It didn't matter. The identification aligned with Officer Craig Donovan's profile. Ex-military, shaved head, a history of perceived threat language. The prior encounter reframed the shooting, less random escalation, more targeted harassment, poised to explode when the moment presented itself. Daniel widened the lens beyond PD city inspection records, flagged selective enforcement hammering businesses owned by or serving black residents. Zoning minutes showed black entrepreneurs rejected for fit, while identical white proposals sailed through. Bias didn't hide in speeches. It lived in footnotes, rubber stamps, and quiet no's. The most damning pieces came from Caldwell's private emails, captured through carefully aimed digital work. He acknowledged the demographic maintenance strategy plainly, worrying only about political optics. Meanwhile, the PR machine intensified. feature packages casting Daniel as a radical, Naomi's app as subversive, and protests as coordinated destabilization. Anonymous voices hinted Daniel was fired from federal service. He wasn't. Local TV aired Brookfield Under Siege, spotlighting officers' families, describing stress and fear. Not a second on body cams, forgotten, or the confiscation attempts. The narrative hardened, heroic guardians assailed by shadows, a familiar morality play with inverted villains. Daniel countered with precision, partnering only with reporters who'd earned it. Vanessa Kim at the Regional Tribune published a data rich expose, patrol heat maps, stop statistics, former officers on the record, corroborated testimony. The firewall of local spin cracked. National outlets and civil rights groups turned their eyes toward Brookfield. Predictably, the department doubled down with patrol surges in black neighborhoods, retaliation as policy. Traffic stops spiked overnight, petty citations multiplied. 3 black owned businesses closed for health violations, identical to those tolerated elsewhere. A church hosting forums suddenly failed parking compliance. Every move strengthened Daniel's ledger and their eventual downfall. Through escalation, Daniel stayed methodical. Each overreach became both confirmation and exhibit. On a secure call, he told allies, "They're acting on schedule. Pressure is forcing visible mistakes." Brooks looked pained. "They're hurting people, Daniel." He nodded, grief contained. They were already hurting people. "Now we're proving it, publicly," he continued. "This is the system's death throes. Document everything." Then, addressing the broader audience they knew was watching, "Do you believe working outside broken systems is sometimes necessary to fix them? Comment 1, if justified by truth. 2, if law alone should prevail. Like, subscribe, stay engaged, pressure matters." The question sharpened as Daniel prepared his counterstrike. Would Ethan Price find courage to break ranks? How far would Blackwell go to bury his department's darkest truths? In Terrence Washington's farmhouse basement, screens glowed as Operation Transparency neared ignition. 14 days of mapping corruption distilled into a single, devastating plan. Racks hummed, feeds from municipal networks stitched into dashboards. Timelines aligned, emails, dispatch logs, patrol assignments, donor flows, procurement trails. The architecture of control was no longer rumor. It was a diagram with labels and arrows. Exposure, Daniel knew, must be immediate, redundant, and irrefutable, or it would be smothered. "Systems check complete," Washington reported, fingers dancing with old soldier efficiency. "Secure channels up." Mirrors hot. Backups live. Daniel felt the familiar stillness of go time. This wasn't vengeance, it was calibration. Piece by piece, you remove the scaffolding that props up lies, until the facade must carry its own weight. Phase 1 targeted encrypted police servers, the departmental nervous system. Months-old access paths bloomed open at Daniel's touch. He ghosted through permissions, pulling archives while leaving nothing disturbed on the surface. Within minutes, he had Blackwell's restricted cache, notes too sensitive for routine channels, instructions written like no one else would ever read them. In parallel, the human vector activated. Officer Ethan Price, worn thin by conscience and quiet messages, agreed to wear a concealed recorder to a narrative alignment meeting. Discovery meant career death, criminal charges, maybe worse. Yet he clipped the device under his collar, breath slow, a choice hardening into courage. "All units placed," Daniel said over the secure line. Redundancy confirmed. If one feed dies, 5 remain. He watched the clocks converge, mirrors sinking to offsite vaults. Operation Transparency was not a single reveal. It was a cascade designed to survive sabotage, denial, and the oldest trick, pulling the plug. The meeting convened in a secure conference room at headquarters. Blackwell at the head, Keller and Donovan flanking, chosen brass-filling chairs. Price took his seat, pulse skipping, eyes neutral. The recorder hummed silently, indifferent to rank or threat, turning whispered strategy into future evidence with a simple red blink. Daniel monitored three angles: internal audio, network traffic, and a hallway cam they'd missed. He tracked device pairings, watched phones switch to airplane mode, saw the internal Wi Fi isolate. Old instincts returned: anticipate, adjust, archive. When power concentrates, it leaves a shadow. That's where you aim your light. Blackwell's voice cut through the room, colder without microphones. We keep the story tight, no deviations, non compliance, threatening movement. Body cam irregularities are technical, nothing more. Chairs creaked, pens tapped. Price stared at his folded hands and did not look up. The recorder, faithful, captured every syllable without judgment. The story remains consistent, Blackwell finished, each word a nail. Anyone strays, they answer to me. Daniel watched timestamps lock, backups complete, mirrors green. Phase 1 was secure. He exhaled once, measured, controlled, then moved the cursor to Phase 2. When truth is a flood, the dam doesn't crack, it fails. The chief pressed on, unaware his words were streaming to Daniel's secure servers. Subject was non-compliant with verbal commands. Officers observed a threatening move toward what appeared to be a weapon. Standard protocol was followed. Then came the order that turned ethical rot into criminal conspiracy. Procedure weaponized, accountability prearranged, truth scheduled for deletion. Donovan, process those body cams that malfunctioned. Standard memory corruption. Full reformat, he said. Keller, adjust your incident timeline. I've sent the template. Price, if you're going to puke, do it after. Pull yourself together or enjoy a decade of graveyard traffic in our roughest district. Corruption sounded routine, almost bored. The recording captured more than commands to destroy evidence. It revealed a culture where obstruction was habit, not exception. Jokes masked directives, pens scratched as careers aligned to a lie. In that room, legality was theater props, and the script demanded everyone hit their marks without flinching or thinking. As that bombshell logged to mirrored vaults, Daniel launched Phase 2, a digital lure built to catch conspirators mid-whisper. Through the department's compromised channels, he seeded intel about a new witness video contradicting official statements. Panic bloomed, threads lit up, crosstalk spiked. Every frantic ping became another stitched line in the noose. The flurry of encrypted chats, side texts, and hurried calls mapped a choreography of deceit. Who coached whom? Which captain sanitized language? What phrases to repeat on camera? Meanwhile, deep in Blackwell's shielded cache, Daniel found the pivot: explicit direction to target Naomi's app months before the shooting. Preemptive intervention. One email named officers Keller and Donovan and described the deaf black girl developing recording software that threatens officer safety. Orders: find opportunities for preemptive intervention. The paper trail converted a narrative of miscommunication into a premeditated civil rights strike, aimed not at danger but at documentation and those who might create it. Using recovery techniques polished in darker theaters, Daniel resurrected messages the department believed gone forever. They outlined a standing playbook: assign tech specialists to edit or corrupt incriminating footage, classify the damage as accidental, bury the metadata. Malfunctions weren't bad luck, they were policy by other means. An exchange between Blackwell and the IT lead detailed acquisition of software designed to selectively corrupt video files while simulating random failure. Purchase orders masked as maintenance utilities logs laundered. Training notes euphemized triage. The sophistication belied years of practice. This wasn't improvisation, it was a craft honed in shadow. Daniel also surfaced an unofficial resident database tagging Brookfield citizens by race. Black residents were flagged for enhanced scrutiny, independent of any record. Side-by-side comparisons showed identical violations yielding warnings for white residents and arrests for black neighbors. The spreadsheet didn't argue, it tallied. Bias had columns, filters, and totals. Most chilling was a folder linking 3 suspicious deaths of black residents to police contact Within hours of each incident, each ruled accidental or health related. Witness statements suggested otherwise. Timelines bent. Reports whispered omissions. The pattern felt familiar. Declare closure. Bury context. Outweight attention. This time, attention had teeth. Feeling heat, Blackwell convened a trusted circle. Unknowing the conference room was wired by a maintenance ally. Someone is inside our system, he warned, composure fraying. IT is working nonstop to find the breach. Until then, no sensitive communication on department networks. Nothing you wouldn't want on the Tribune's front page. Desperation produced dumber moves. Blackwell spun up an off-books hunt team, officers with excessive force histories, to locate Carter. They raided homes and shops tied to Daniel's contacts, warrants thin or missing. Hidden mics and cams already waiting drank in threats of violence, scheduling, and the muscle memory cadence of unlawful searches. Those recordings captured explicit intent to neutralize Daniel if found, elevating charges from internal misconduct to conspiracy against rights, intimidation, and obstruction. The knot tightened. Then an alert flashed. Hospital cam feeds flagged two plainclothes officers attempting to breach Naomi's room during shift change, skirting private security with insider timing. Staff spotted and blocked them, but the message was unmistakable. The department would endanger a hospitalized 15-year-old to protect its fiction. Daniel's reply was immediate. Execute Phase 3, he told Washington. A curated dossier rocketed to the FBI Civil Rights Division, enough to ignite, not enough to overwhelm or taint. Federal attention hit Brookfield like a cold front. Blackwell's contacts warned him of a preliminary inquiry. Panic metastasized through threads Daniel still watched. He logged timestamps, copied rosters, watched lieutenants trade assurances that sounded like prayers. Institutions that fear sunshine try curtains first. Failing that, they look for matches. A hastily convened off-site, secure meeting gathered Blackwell's core loyalists. Hidden cams, placed days earlier at Daniel's request, captured everything. Purge, Blackwell ordered. Servers, paper, personal devices, wipe now. Any officer with exposure moves to leave immediately on video. His authority looked less like command than cornered instinct. Donovan, erase your body cam issues tonight. Keller, those racial texts with Wilson, gone. No loose ends, Blackwell snapped, unaware every syllable and gesture were archived in triplicate. Daniel had counted on this reflex. When power panics, it documents its own crimes with urgency, then trusts luck to handle the rest. As fear spread, officers acted for themselves. Some downloaded pristine personnel files and commendations. Others quietly deleted questionable exchanges. Alliances shifted. Those who could read weather moved early. Loyalists clung to the sinking hull. Daniel watched fracture lines widen, where pressure met conscience or calculation. Either could break a wall. He then executed a precise network disruption, briefly hobbling official comms while exposing the department's shadow back channel, used for questionable coordination. The malfunction forced traffic onto the clandestine system, now visible to federal monitors. What they built to hide themselves became the billboard advertising exactly who they were. Through it all, Daniel kept a lifeline to Naomi. Her recovery allowed detailed statements on a hardened tablet. She documented the shooting, Sullivan's earlier harassment, her communication needs as a deaf teenager, and what she saw and didn't on the library steps. Medical records and expert affidavits framed her testimony in unassailable context. The first public cracks appeared when two junior officers approached federal agents separately, seeking immunity for testimony. Their accounts aligned with Daniel's archive and added incidents no dataset had captured. Jokes in locker rooms that weren't jokes, standing orders whispered as tradition, punishments for refusing to get with the program. Strategically timed releases to trustworthy reporters amplified the shift. Protests swelled from dozens to hundreds. Neighbors, faith groups, students, shopkeepers, businesses once silent described targeted inspections and fines. The storyline was no longer abstract. It had storefronts, invoices, and faces. News chyrons stopped hedging. Euphemisms grew scarce. Lower ranks scrambled. Two resigned with careful letters. Three requested transfers. Operational strain mounted. Patrol grids developed holes. The once solid wall of silence became a lattice. Light getting through, voices slipping out. Daniel, in briefings with his core team, marked each defection as another predictable consequence of sustained measured pressure. They're imploding per model, he noted calmly. Loyalty is now competing with self-preservation. Brooks scanned the latest caches, astonished. When this goes public end to end, it won't stop at officers. Mayor, DA, several council members, either complicit or willfully blind. Daniel nodded once. Systemic rot requires systemic cleansing. None of them fully grasped how reckless the cornered remnants might become. Subpoenas landed. Federal cars idled near city buildings. Radios hissed with unease. Daniel understood endgames. When structures buckle, someone always tries a last dangerous swing. Preparation isn't paranoia, it's survival in slow motion, planned frame by frame. As agents set up shop in Brookfield, the timeline accelerated. Daniel Carter, once a shadow operator, had repurposed his craft for a single crystalline mission: justice for his daughter and structural change for a town trained to look away. Possibility hardened into inevitability. Only the final confrontation remained to be staged. The FBI's regional team raised a command post in an unmarked office park, deliberately avoiding civic buildings with local fingerprints. Equipment cases clicked open, whiteboards filled, subpoenas multiplied. The first interviews began. Inside the storm, Daniel's files weren't theory. They were scaffolding for the questions now backed by federal teeth. Special Agent Maya Patel, 15 years in civil rights work, studied the mosaic with cautious detachment that soon turned to honest shock. In 20 years of federal service, I've never seen corruption this comprehensive or this well evidenced, she told Daniel at their initial sit down, professionalism bending towards something like fury. After verifying Daniel's background through federal systems, Patel accepted the full package: hashes, provenance chains, collection methods annotated. Some of your approaches live in legal gray, she acknowledged. But considering the obstruction you documented and immediate danger to your daughter, we have grounds to admit the critical core. The context speaks louder than the method they mapped: next steps, synchronized warrants, preservation orders, protective measures for witnesses, and a staged disclosure cadence designed to withstand political interference. Daniel emphasized redundancies, mirrors on mirrors. If they pull one thread, he said, 5 more hold. Patel nodded. Good. We've seen threads yanked before. Not often this many backups outside. Brookfield's veneer thinned. Donors called officials with suddenly careful voices. Past favor trading felt radioactive. Journalists requested records once denied. Clerks began to cooperate. In church basements and living rooms, neighbors compared notes and realized their stories rhymed. The town's true map, unofficial, unvoted, was finally being redrawn. Patel closed the binder, meeting Daniel's steady gaze. We move now, she said, clean, fast, documented at every step. He nodded, the old operational calm settling in. For years, Brookfield controlled the narrative. Today, the record would control Brookfield, and the facts at last would speak without permission. The federal footprint rattled Brookfield's hierarchy. Mayor Stephen Caldwell, reading the wind, quietly floated cooperation through intermediaries, testimony against Chief Blackwell and the department in exchange for protection and a softer political landing. DA Melissa Grant appeared visibly drained, canceling briefings and pushing duties to deputies while consulting defense counsel. At Brookfield Memorial, Naomi continued recovering, now guarded by federal protection layered atop the private security Daniel had already installed. 3 weeks after the shooting, she gave formal testimony from her bed, signing through a certified interpreter on a specialized system. Her precise account contradicted police claims, especially about warnings allegedly issued before the first shots. Most devastating was her identification of Officer Craig Donovan from a prior stop, shaved head, mocking laughter at her deaf ID. He recognized me, she signed, emphatic. He knew exactly who I was before he fired. The true inflection point arrived when Officer Ethan Price, after sleepless deliberation, agreed to turn federal witness. Under immunity, he described systemic targeting of black residents, routine intimidation, fabricated reports, and orchestrated evidence tampering as a normalized internal practice. Price testified that training never written taught different suspicion thresholds by race. We were primed to see threats in black teens with phones, as he said. White teens acting the same were just kids. That double standard was culture. As agents secured records and drives, Blackwell staged a midnight run to destroy paper files in a restricted room, ordering a plumbing emergency to drown evidence. He didn't know Daniel's cameras were already watching. Federal agents, tipped by Daniel's live feeds, intercepted the plan minutes before pipes were breached. The hallway confrontation distilled 3 weeks of investigation into one undeniable tableau: panic, obstruction, and a chief cornered by his own habits. Daniel arrived with attorney Anthony Brooks and 2 U.S. Marshals, symbol and strategy intertwined. A father walking into the building that nearly killed his daughter, now crowded with agents and officers wavering between loyalties. "You've destroyed this department," Blackwell snarled, voice edged with ruin. 15 years of safety undone because your daughter refused commands. Daniel's reply, quiet and lethal, stilled the lobby. "What I destroyed was your corruption masquerading as order. You trained officers to see black residents as suspects and white residents as citizens. Imam," Daniel continued. "My daughter built tools to prevent misunderstandings. Your culture made understanding impossible." The room seemed to lean toward him. "I've cataloged 1,247 civil rights violations," he said evenly. 73 instances you personally directed targeted harassment. He stepped closer, deliberate, unblinking. Numbers, dates, commands, receipts that wouldn't burn, wouldn't crash, wouldn't disappear on a server error. "I have every deleted email and text outlining your profiling playbook," Daniel added, "funding links to extremist donors, falsified crime stats to counsel, ordered suppression of minority complaints." Authority slid off Blackwell like paint in rain when Daniel named the cover-up in Andre Johnson's death, ruled suicide despite evidence. Blackwell lunged. Agents intercepted, hands firm. The lobby held its breath, then exhaled in the sound of handcuffs being readjusted. The collapse accelerated. Donovan, facing decades if convicted, attempted suicide, saved by his wife's quick response. Each hour, more phones buzzed with subpoenas, more whispers turned toward lawyers, not lieutenants. Grant, confronted with archived suppression and selective prosecution, negotiated cooperation, naming officials and mapping timelines. Caldwell followed, trading insider detail for survival, private assurances to donors, enforcement directed to maintain character, the euphemism speaking louder than any slur. National media finally descended. Cable shows aired "Systemic Racism Exposed," interviewing residents long dismissed as complainers. The scandal stopped being about one library staircase. It became a mirror many cities didn't want. Investigative desks drew lines from Brookfield to similar patterns elsewhere. Meanwhile, Naomi's strength grew. Therapy restored balance and stamina, though doctors warned of lasting limitation in her left leg, an old wound with new resolve beside it. Healing the mind was harder. Specialized therapists, fluent in signing and trauma work, guided her through flashbacks and vigilance. Resilience didn't mean fear vanished. It meant fear lost veto power over her future. 4 weeks out, as indictments were drafted for 27 players, Naomi went home. Security tightened. Threats rose from those furious their order had consequences. Daniel hardened the house, sensors, air-gapped systems, layered perimeters, a fortress for convalescence and focus. Under federal oversight, an interim command stabilized essential services while the department underwent full reconstruction. Rights workshops sprang up in church halls. Residents learned to document, to insist, to refuse the script that once defined them. Business owners burned by selective enforcement formed a coalition for equitable development. Congregations that had stayed quiet faced reckonings. Some split, others began slow, necessary conversations about complicity, repentance, and repair. Through turmoil, Daniel remained meticulous. Hashes, chain of custody, provenance. Defense teams probed for technicalities. He'd preempted most. The work felt less like vengeance than architecture, building cases that could bear appellate weight. 5 weeks after the shots, leaves bronzed. DOJ announced civil rights indictments, Blackwell and 11 officers, additional counts for Caldwell, Grant, and 7 more officials, conspiracy and obstruction woven through their calendars and inboxes. The U.S. Attorney publicly acknowledged Daniel Carter's extraordinary assistance, evidence that might have stayed buried without his stubborn precision. As trials queued, Daniel refocused on Naomi and a new foundation aimed at durable accountability. Their shift from victims to catalysts wasn't neat redemption. It was proof that systems crack when pressed by evidence, expertise, and refusal to look away, especially when love insists on outworking malice. Change began before verdicts. Under federal stewardship, hiring pipelines diversified, training prioritized de escalation, early warning systems flagged patterns. The culture's old gravity fought back, but the floor had tilted, and people noticed. 6 months later, spring warmed Brookfield Community Park. Naomi walked to the podium, a faint limp pacing her steps. Daniel stayed close, protective, yet letting her own orbit reassert itself. The crowd rose, roaring. The interpreter stood ready. Naomi scanned the faces, then began. Steady hands, clear eyes. The department was reorganized, oversight tightened, complaint processes strengthened. What once passed as normal now had forms, audits, and sunlight. 80% of the old force was replaced, recruiting for empathy and community roots. Daniel declined prestigious offers, including a DOJ role, to launch the Naomi Carter Foundation for Law Enforcement Accountability. Seeded by a $12 million settlement, the foundation funded reforms and tech for safer engagements with vulnerable communities. Naomi's app, BridgeSpeak, matured into a platform. Visual instructions, signed prompts, automatic recording, adopted statewide. Former Chief Blackwell and 11 officers faced trial, 5 already flipped, testifying upward. Broader charges also landed on ex-Mayor Caldwell, ex-Dia Grant, and a dozen officials, conspiracy, obstruction, civil rights violations unspooled across indictments. With the old edifice gone, new leadership emerged, reflecting the city it served. 2 black council members, Brookfield's first Latino mayor. Librarian Claire Park, first on the steps that day, won a council seat on transparency and reform. The most complicated chapter involved Officer Ethan Price. His testimony was pivotal, yet memories of his presence at the shooting lingered. He was shunned by former peers and viewed cautiously by neighbors he hoped to help. After months of reflection, Daniel and Naomi met Price in a neutral space, mediated by Reverend Hayes. They talked about systems, choices, harm, and repair. No absolution offered, no easy condemnations either. Complexity, faced directly. I can't forget you fired too, Naomi signed, Daniel interpreting. But I see how systems trap people. Courage is breaking out Price, newly learning ASL, signed haltingly. Thank you for your strength. I'm sorry, every day beyond institutions, Brookfield worked on itself. Facilitated dialogues, community truth sessions, history taught honestly. Schools added curricula on structural racism and civic duty. Mentorship bridged neighborhoods previously divided by lines nobody admitted drawing. Returning to school, Naomi expected hostility. She found care. Teachers trained in trauma support, students forming a welcome team, classmates learning signs to talk with her directly. Survival shifted toward belonging, then toward influence. Her vision widened. Beyond Bridge Speak, she prototyped tools for interactions with people on the spectrum, those facing mental health crises and residents with limited English, interfaces that slowed escalation and made space for dignity. 2 weeks before the celebration, Daniel and Naomi visited Lydia's grave. Fresh flowers, quiet updates, signed promises. Love didn't cancel grief. It threaded grief into something that could hold weight without collapsing. Lydia had worried about raising a black daughter in America. The library steps proved her fears. The months since proved something else. Communities can bend toward courage when confronted with documented truth and relentless compassion. At the park, Daniel reflected, tradecraft exposed vulnerabilities. Love supplied endurance. Together they outlasted a machine designed to exhaust challengers. Naomi's hands moved. The interpreter voiced for those still learning to see. 6 months ago, I built an app because I was afraid, she signed. Today I build from hope. What hurt me shows what's possible when truth is witnessed and defended. Real justice isn't only punishment, she continued. It's creating structures where harm can't hide. Brookfield isn't finished, but we've started. The applause wasn't for tidiness, it was for commitment to keep showing up. The gathering closed with reflection and new initiatives: civilian review expansion, youth leadership grants, small business equity funds. Then Daniel's secure phone buzzed, an encrypted ping from quiet allies with a familiar pattern line attached. Another jurisdiction, neighboring and comfortable, showed the same signatures: selective enforcement, quota pressures, procurement shadows. The map extended. Systems rarely stop at borders, neither do responsibilities, once you know where to look. Daniel glanced at Naomi amid friends, laughter bright against lingering scars. The question pressed: how far does our obligation reach? How do you balance healing at home with harm still humming next door? He knew answers aren't immediate. Skills that dismantled Brookfield's myths could travel, so could fatigue. Wisdom was choosing fights that built, not simply burned. The next step would require listening, not just evidence. What are you thinking? Naomi signed on their walk home. That some journeys continue past the first horizon, he answered. Change rarely ends. It changes us, then asks for more. She nodded, understanding landing softly. Together they carried both weight and possibility, private pain, public duty, accepting that wholeness isn't the absence of damage, but the presence of direction. The path stayed uncertain. Their partnership didn't. Forward remained the plan. Brookfield's reconstruction made space for growth that honored injury by preventing repetition. The point wasn't victory laps, it was designing guardrails so fewer families would ever stand where they had stood. The shift from a city defined by institutional racism to one confronting it wasn't a headline, it was a practice. Evidence and expertise mattered. So did stubborn hope and neighbors unwilling to be quiet again. What began as a father's promise had become a blueprint, replicable, imperfect, alive. The work asked for vigilance, not spectacle, coalitions, not saviors. The future wanted maintenance more than miracles. Even so, the lessons traveled. Documentation breaks denial. Alliances outlast intimidation. Transparency weakens impunity. People changed roles. Insiders choosing whistleblowing. Outsiders choosing stewardship. The floor held because many hands braced it. Does one determined person change a system? The narrator asked the stream. Sometimes, if they collect receipts, invite partners, and refuse cynicism's comfort. Daniel chose law and leverage together, not purity that leaves harm intact. If this journey resonates, support stories that center evidence over rumor, community over spectacle. Share with someone who still thinks racism requires slurs to exist. The mechanics matter. So does who's brave enough to name them. Systemic racism persists quietly through procedures, priorities, and permissions. Daniel's methodical unspooling showed how expertise and resolve can pry open sealed rooms. Naomi's survival made the cost visible. Her work made prevention imaginable. Accountability isn't just charging individuals, it's rebuilding architectures. When institutions close ranks, sometimes you must operate adjacent to force them open. Marginalized communities shouldn't shoulder that burden, but history often asks them to anyway. Brookfield's coalition mixed insiders, breaking rank with outsiders, refusing silence. Power relies on our resignation. When communities align around documented truth, even old fortresses start cracking. Foundations dislodge under the weight of receipts. Justice aims beyond punishment to prevention and repair. New systems must make yesterday's harm logistically difficult, politically costly, and culturally unthinkable. That's design work, budget work, training work, less viral, more vital. Where do your local systems need audit and daylight? Which, that's just how it is, excuses mask design choices. Tell us what you've seen. Patterns, pressure points, places courage could be contagious. If you believe truth can pry institutions open, amplify these narratives. Subscribe for more work that pairs documentation with determination. Share with someone who still trusts slogans over spreadsheets. Pressure multiplied becomes policy. May this story move all of us to examine the systems we inhabit and to stand together when standing alone once felt safer. The path is difficult and unfinished. That's why it needs many feet, not one. When the world tilts against you, the first thing to go is often the record. In Lakefield, malfunctions, missing footage, and muddled timelines weren't accidents, they were tactics. What turned the tide wasn't louder outrage, it was cleaner evidence. Think of it like keeping meticulous home files, appliance warranties, Medicare letters, tax receipts. In a crisis, those folders become your shield. For families, especially seniors helping grandkids, start simple, then build habits. Log every police interaction in a spiral notebook: date, time, officer names, badge numbers, a short description, any witnesses. Snap photos of locations and injuries with timestamps. Save emails and voicemails, back them up to a flash drive. If you can, use a basic phone app that automatically uploads videos to the cloud the moment you hit record so nothing vanishes if a device is taken. Teach grandchildren the same steps: calm, steady, factual. Why this matters for older Americans: you've seen decades of official stories. You know memory gets contested. Documentation honors your lived truth and protects your family. In Lakefield, a father's disciplined record keeping, a librarian's timeline, and a student's video didn't just tell a story, they forced the story to tell the truth. That is dignity. That is leverage. No system this large falls because one person shouts. It bends when many people push in the same direction. Lakefield changed when unlikely partners linked arms: a survivor and her dad, a no nonsense doctor, a librarian with receipts, an attorney who knew the courts, and even a conflicted officer who chose conscience over comfort. Seniors are often the bridge: trusted voices at church, longtime neighbors, volunteers who know whose lights are out during a storm. Here's a practical playbook. Begin with who you already trust: faith groups, senior clubs, PTA grandparents, local business owners. Share what you've documented, not rumors. Ask one question: what can each of us do within our lane this week? A pastor can host a rights workshop in the fellowship hall. A pharmacist can post information on de escalation and interpreter access. A retired teacher can tutor students on media literacy so they spot spin on TV. A former city worker might quietly explain where the procurement skeletons get buried. Expect pushback, permit games, surprise inspections, scary headlines. That's a sign you're touching the real wires. Keep your tone measured, your facts neat, your circle growing. In Lakefield, the coalition didn't seek revenge. It insisted on repair, new training, outside oversight, and technology that made injustice harder to hide. That's not just politics, that's neighborly responsibility. And it starts at a kitchen table with a list, a plan, and two or three phone calls before dinner. If this story and these lessons gave you something solid to hold on to, I'd love to hear from you. What would documenting look like in your family? Who keeps the notebook? Who backs up the videos? Who calls the church to host a rights night? Share one concrete step you'll take this week. If you found value here, please tap like, drop your questions or experiences in the comments, and subscribe to my YouTube channel so you don't miss practical tools, calm guidance, and real stories that protect our loved ones and strengthen our neighborhoods. Your voice might spark someone else's first step.